So a really, really good morning and welcome, or good afternoon. It could be good afternoon, it could be evening, whenever you're watching this. And I just want to say welcome to my friends. It's like one of those game shows where you have, those famous panels of each person in a different square, those kind of game shows. So here we are with my friends and guests. I'm going to not to say what necessarily, actually really briefly, your name and what you do, but in 10 seconds or less, just so that, because many of the viewers at home might know who already you are. But Frank, we'll just start with you.
Hi everyone, my name's Frank Munro. I'm a civil servant. I work for the Ministry of Justice as a campaign manager.
Lovely. And Aleksandra, over to you.
Hello, I'm Aleksandra. I'm a yoga teacher.
Wonderful. And next on my picture is Maya.
Hi there, I'm Maya. I'm a qualified accountant, but looking for a career change into health and well-being and community.
Wonderful. Excellent. And next on my picture is Leigh.
Hi, I'm Leigh. I do a little bit of everything, I think, these days. I think I'm a fundraiser these days. But I usually organize events and retreats and people's well-being.
Wonderful. And next up is Danny, and there's a clue to what you're currently doing in the background.
Hiya, my name's Danny. I've been in lockdown for 12, 13 weeks of not working, so I wasn't sure if I was going to make these sessions anymore, but I really find them so beneficial for just my midday week check-in as well. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm in the barber shop because I'm a barber and we're back trading. So thanks for having me, and excuse me if I'm eating whilst talking because it's my lunch break.
Excellent. Well, good to see you. And Iris.
Yeah, I'm Iris, and I'm marketing and fundraising consultant, and currently having a bit of a break to reinvent and reconfigure myself and business.
Excellent, no problem at all. Welcome, I'm so glad you're on. It's good, that thing about now is a perfect time to kind of reconsider. And Kojo, I wonder if you can hear us. I'm going to invite you to unmute and just if you want to briefly introduce yourself, my friend. Let's see if you can hear us.
Hi, I'm Kojo. My camera will start very, very soon. I'm having a few technical issues here. My name is Kojo, and I work in media. I work with Fantastic Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Wonderful, excellent, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Good to see you here. And well, good to see everybody. And our topic today is belief. And Mia Morris has just arrived, and we'll let Mia introduce herself in a moment. But our topic today is belief at heart. And here comes Iris Griffiths as well. So we'll welcome them in a minute. But our topic today is really belief. And it's a huge topic, isn't it? Self-belief, believing in oneself, faith belief. It's huge. It's broad. Sometimes it can be very, very, very contentious. And so I think one of the first things I wanted to say before we kind of jumped into today's topic around belief is for us to be, I guess, mindful that might be so many different people from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, different viewpoints, who all have a different take on today's topic. But nonetheless, I think it'll be a really rich topic for us to kind of really spend some time to look at, because it's a topic that's really important for us human beings in so many areas. I mean, my background was in media and performance, and as a singer performer, where belief and confidence, it's interesting, belief and confidence are really, really, really hugely important topics. And just to say a quick wave to the people who've just joined us, the wonderful Mia, who's, you see, lunch, you see, Mia, the lunch club, you've inspired the lunch club. Danny's there having his lunch at the moment. Iris Griffiths, a warm welcome to you. And Kojo's here. And our topic today is belief. And does anyone want to kick off, or do you want me to kick off with a couple of quotes that I was interested in perhaps sharing? What do you think? Anyone got anything to say straight away, or shall I just jump into these quotes that I had? So it's interesting. Well, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try and let me see if I can make this show. But it's interesting if I can make this show on my computer. I don't know if you can see this. It's not going to. Hang on. No. Belief and be life. I was thinking about belief in this word, belief, and be life, right? It's funny sometimes how words, how just, there's just that one slight letter shift. Anyway, the quote that I wanted to share was this. Belief is the most fascinating equation, for it can add and multiply, but equally if miscalculated, it can subtract and divide, isn't it? So it's interesting how belief can so empower us. It can be self-empowering. It can help us achieve things we never thought of that we could achieve. It can inspire. It brings people together for a common cause. but also it can be one of the things that sets one person against another, this person against that person, this football team against that football team, this person who thinks this ideology against this ideology. And so it's a huge, huge topic. Maybe I wonder if it's worth starting off with this topic of self-belief. Maybe we should start off here in terms of self-belief. Anyone want to kind of step in here with this thing around self-belief? Frank, okay, please, over to you, my friend.
I think for me, guys, it's really apt at the moment, particularly with COVID and Black Lives Matter. So, for example, in the Ministry of Justice, I seem to be the focal point for a lot of those uncomfortable conversations. And the thing that's driving me is knowing how palpably wrong the system is and trying to bring that to the attention to the majority audience that, you know, particularly when we're talking about white privilege, because the best way I can describe it is I tell my team that I'm an introvert, but I'm not when it's something that I believe in and I'm passionate about. I will step out of my, you know, I have that strength, innate courage, if you like, to be able to step out and have those difficult conversations. And yeah, and for me, that perfectly encapsulates it.
That's really powerful, Frank. So when you're saying that, actually, naturally you'd see yourself as an introvert, but when it's something that you're really passionate about and that's close to your heart and that you care about, then that self-belief kicks in, and then the courage and everything else emerges from that, right?
Yeah.
Can I just ask one last supplementary question? Have you been able to, through then that belief in self, or the cause, or whatever it is, the thing that's sparked that, have you been able to achieve things that have quite surprised you that you've been able to do through that belief?
To be honest with you, Rash, most of the time, yes, because I try and sit down and think it through and imagine the type of pushback that I'm going to get. So I'm not going to be blinded by my passion. You need to actually have a plan, if you're, especially if you're trying to change hearts and minds. So for example, just a really quick example, I said to a colleague, look, we're having these difficult conversations, but I'm not going into the room and accusing anybody of being a racist or racism. I'm going to go in the room and talk about white privilege and the things that white people do not have to think about, that a lot of black people have to think about, and bring the conversation in that way.
That's also interesting, because I think what's interesting about what you're saying there is that you're often having to go into a room where different people may have different views or beliefs about issues or topics or how the organisation should be run, which is interesting, isn't it? How our own sense of belief, how that begins to interact with other people's beliefs or ideas and so on. Very, very interesting. Anyone else want to step in here in terms of this topic about belief? And I'm mindful of people who are eating and chewing. Leigh, you just edged forward, so I just wonder your thoughts here. And I wonder if you know, in some of your work in the realm of where people are often going on, for example, on retreats, they're often going on a journey of, I guess, self-discovery, isn't it? That there's been some kind of a call. I guess sometimes it might well be a spiritual belief, or it might be a very practical belief that something they're wanting to shift and change in somehow in their life. You know, I just wonder what your thought is on any of this stuff.
It's an interesting topic for me. I wasn't on the call last week, so I didn't actually know what it was until I saw your message today. So, I mean, as a practicing Buddhist for a long time, I guess, you know, this is what came to my mind first when I saw it, is that there's a kind of a saying that you don't believe all of the concepts that are coming up. You're using concepts to break concepts. So the beliefs of things are not always as solid and fixed as you believe them to be. They're always changing as things are changing, but there's a continual kind of stream through that. So belief is such a loaded word for me in many ways, but I think there's two other words that also kind of for me are sort of synonyms, I guess, in a way, well, the way I interpret them anyway, is trust, faith, and belief. And the word I usually resonate with more is trust. If there's something like what I really like what Frank said about, you know, if you have that kind of strong conviction with something, I can also be very introverted sometimes, but if it's something that I really believe in, then suddenly it's, you know, all that belief in or, you know, being shy or being afraid or whatever kind of stuff comes up, that goes away. It just flies away, because your conviction is so strong. If you feel that something is being unjust, or that you just, you don't care anymore. The belief in the self just kind of slips away. The ego self is what I'm referring to. And I guess with the retreats and things like that, it's interesting because you never know. I think it really depends on how long something like a retreat or an interaction with someone is, because it's always, when you're meeting people for the first time, you know, people have so many layers, and people are shy, or people don't really know, you know, what is this, or what does this mean, or what does retreat mean, or any of these things. Aleksandra and I were having a bit of a conversation about what retreats, or, you know, these kinds of things mean to us. But I guess it's, you know, it takes time for those layers and the belief systems and the belief in self to reveal themselves. It's not something that, you know, through a first interaction, like I guess like our group here meeting regularly for the past few months, we're all more comfortable with each other. We've never met in person. Many of us have never met in person, but there's a sense of familiarity or comfort with that. So it's a belief that this is a safe space for us all together, where we can be open and we can share and learn from each other. So it's a big topic. It's a big topic.
Beautiful. And I love the way that you brought in these other words here, trust and faith, because it's interesting. One of the things that strikes me is that sometimes one word can evoke some emotions, and another word, which broadly means something very, very similar, can evoke completely different emotions depending who we are. And I can see, Uytrecht, that you're just nodding now. I want to invite you in at that moment if there's anything that you're wanting to perhaps share.
Well, I like what Frank said, definitely, because it's interesting. When I look at the word belief, if I look at myself, there are some areas that I do have this high degree of self-belief in myself. And, you know, I just see that as a confidence, you know, oh, I am confident about that because I have the information, I know where I am coming from. And even if others look at that as, some may look at that as confidence as well, others may look at that as arrogance, which I am ready to deal with it because of my self-confidence in what I believe. But then when I look at belief in a general way, I just always think in humanity. Every time that I'm talking about belief, I have to remember they are humans. You know, whatever people believe, even if I do not agree with that, I just think, well, I have to understand, you know, from what point they are coming from. And as humans, we sometimes, like it was said by Leigh, we have all this system of beliefs that we put one on the top of the other. And if we do not take beliefs with the idea that, yeah, it's human beings. So, you know, you have to be open to humanity, and humanity fails. Again and again, we fail all the time. And so I just see it like that. But self-belief for me is quite interesting because it depends a lot of the moment that we are living. Like Frank now, he's conveying one situation that he has at the professional setting. I can see him in the same situation in a different moment, and people will actually look at him as the arrogant who thinks that knows everything about Black lives and what is being Black in society. So it depends a lot of how the others, how you come across with your belief, you know, and I think it demands a lot of us understanding at what point others in their humanity are and how we're going to interact with them. So I love the word, but I find it very fluid. Because like Leigh said, this is, you know, there are several layers to it.
Wonderful. I'm loving the things that people are saying. Who wants to come in next? And I love the way that you're all so patient. Maya, you seem to be leaning forward. Well, both Maya and Mia are both leaning forward. I'm wondering who wants to go first. You both seem to be poised. Okay, I'm going to go to Maya and then I'm going to go to Mia. You both seem to be poised and listening intently. So, yeah.
Okay. So I really liked hearing what everyone said as well. And I looked up the definition of belief just now in the dictionary. And one definition is acceptance that something exists or is true, especially without proof. And for me, I think that ties in really well with what we're saying about the scope of the topic and how large it is. And also what Leigh said around using concepts to break concepts when it comes to evaluating belief, and the fact that it can just be a continuous stream of concepts. And what really stands out to me is the fact that belief could be something without proof. However, in relation to self-belief, acceptance that something exists or is true, I think it comes down to intuition, where you don't necessarily have the proof to hand, but you know internally within yourself or intrinsically that something may feel right or not right. But I do feel most strongly that, you know, it needs to be something fluid and and ever evolving as you learn. So I think belief for me goes hand in hand with learning and a growth mindset and evaluating things all the time. So I like that Buddhist concept of using concepts to break concepts within your own belief systems as well.
Absolutely fascinating, really rich hearing what everybody said. Mia Morris, I love the way that you're just poised there and so present. I wish, you know, we should have the Mia Morris School of listening and so on, deep listening. Mia, what's your thoughts on this? Because it's a huge area, as people are saying, isn't it? And it can be complex. Leigh was talking about all the layers, the concepts, break concepts, and you know, there's just so much here. There's the self-belief aspect, and there's being aware of where everybody else is that we've read. And so what's your thoughts here?
It's the cornerstone of life, isn't it? Simply. It could be seamless sometimes, boundless, endless, but it's essentially what we have to fall back on, that Maslow hierarchy of themes.
It's very interesting, that, isn't it? It's such an important point that you mentioned there, that I guess as we human beings, it is one of those things that makes us quite distinct, it would seem, from what we know about animals. I love the way that human beings are always assuming what we know about animals and how intelligent they are and whether they, you know, so I guess there would be a belief, isn't it, that human beings that animals don't necessarily have a belief system and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's interesting, there seems to be something very human about this thing around beliefs. Who wants to come in next? Danny, you seem to be, you know, just readily poised there, and I can see there was somebody at the door desperate maybe for a haircut, and you kept them at bay. So I'll bring you in at this moment.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite strange, actually. It's been very busy, so as you can imagine, but the way I run my barbershop, I'm not on the high street, so I'm not constantly getting people in, so it's a bit of a strange one to have someone there. Yeah, I love what everyone's been saying so far. I have been listening quite intently, although I've been eating, so apologies for that. But I love how Mia Morris almost summed it all up. I feel like I can't speak after what she's just said, because that does sum up very nicely the cornerstone of life. But what I was thinking of as I was listening as well, is just about my take on it is that if I believe something, I like to be open for change. And I think that goes on quite nicely from what Leigh was saying, is that the belief of actually, even if you have a very strong belief or something, but if somebody else is teaching you, not telling you, because I think that's quite important as well, that we don't tell people our beliefs, we teach them our beliefs. But if we are taught different beliefs than what ours are, but being open that we might have to change them or might have to reevaluate our own belief. And I suppose quite rightly with the Black Lives Movement, I always thought of myself as being quite compassionate to everybody, no matter what's going on, whether it is sexuality, race, or disabilities. I'm very open, but clearly I've realized that actually I've not been taught quite rightly how to talk about these subjects, or how to really make my voice heard, and that I need to make my voice heard if I do truly believe in it. So I'm learning as well, and I think that's really important. But if someone was to tell me, you must do this, I think that's very different, because then I'm not going to pick up on that as easily. So I think there's a lot of people who have strong beliefs, quite rightly so, but it's the way we adapt and change, the way that we talk about them, that helps the change and the movements happen. So instead of it being a dictatorship, we can teach and learn. And I guess that is what I would like to see for mental health, especially in awareness, because I'm quite a compassionate barber, that our school system, we can start teaching our generations these important aspects of how we perceive life should be, as opposed to what it used to be like. It's teaching them, this way, that way, and that is all. My take anyway.
There's a lovely kind of dance that for me is going on between all the things that you're all saying here, between I guess belief that is a very kind of a personal thing, which relates to my own confidence and my own conviction, as Frank talked about and then Leigh talked about. There's this awareness that it was interesting then when Maya highlighted bringing this definition in belief, it's that idea around something without necessarily being proof, but there might be something kind of intrinsically that you have a feeling about, or that you've garnered something around that it holds true for you. There's this thing about it being an absolute cornerstone. There's this thing about being aware of where others are at, and that kind of dance, isn't it? Being aware. And I think that's so important, isn't it? And I think then there's this theme that's coming through here about where they come from, or how they are offered to us or pushed on us or whatever, and then how open that we are in terms of the ones that we happen to hold or ones that we're putting out there, and so on. And I love the mindfulness here, and I'm struck by also something that Leigh was saying before, that it's almost only as we get to know people we might find that out. So it might be, I might assume, isn't it? I have all sorts of assumptions about all of you on this call, and what you believe about this, about education, what you believe about the world, the creativity, the cause of all causes, this, that, but I might have no idea. And it's interesting how we show up, isn't it? Or what I might feel I'm expected to believe about A, B, or C. So it's a very fascinating topic. Aleksandra, I can see you there again. Wonderful, powerful listening. And then we're going to bring in Iris K. You're all such amazing listeners on this call. Again, that's a really powerful thing, isn't it? That, who was it who said last time this thing about deep listening? Who was it saying last time this thing about giving somebody a good listening to? Who was it who said that last time?
It was Danny.
Was it Danny? Was it you said that about?
Danny.
Yeah, a bit of Rob as well. Rob had some
right.
Really good night.
I was on a call that same day where somebody was talking about it, and twice in the same day, that thing about giving a deep listening to. Aleksandra, for you, anything you're wanting to share on this topic of belief?
Yes. As somebody who was raised in Croatia, so it was socialist. So for first 20 years, I believed in that, not communist, but socialist way of being. And so my father was he was communist, and my Croatian. So there was two different, completely opposite sets of beliefs I lived in. And I adopted this scientific, you have to prove me that there is a God. If you can't prove me, I don't believe it. And then, of course, there was a war. And then my brother went to war. And I saw that while we all struggled, my mom had this faith and her prayers, in the power of her prayers. We didn't know where my brother was, for 6 months. But she just prayed, and Mia said that was the cornerstone of her life. And I realized there must be something more than that. All the ideas, there's something deeper, spiritual level. So in the next 10 years, I was working on that and discovering, and then I ended up at the moment in a Buddhist world of beliefs, but it's changing, and I'm always evolving, and I'm really curious what keeps people sane, what gives them power. And as long as it doesn't harm anyone else, I always support all faiths, all beliefs, because I just saw the power of that. And my mom still believes it's the power of her prayers that brought her son back. So, for me, that's the most important thing.
How poetic. I thought that in those few minutes you took us through so many different themes and threads, from the scientific, it needs to be pinned down and proven mathematically, through to where then on the other hand there's this just deep sense of faith and who can say, but then you talked about your own journey into different ones, and then realizing, oh, there's something interesting, that whatever somebody's of this religion, this faith or that faith, there's something very interesting in that space. And for me, what came through for me was that something about what is it in that space beyond which we can necessarily identify or prove or pin down or know, that might be beyond the mind. And maybe this is where it becomes very, very difficult for the mind. And then the mind jumps in wanting to own or guarantee or pin things down, where there might be certain things that just are quite mysterious. Over to you, Iris K. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, especially as somebody whereby I get the feeling whereby from some of the previous conversations, there have been times where all sorts of insights or dreams or things that aren't necessarily that very pinned down order have emerged. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of this stuff around belief.
I have actually three different things there, and it's all about, I think, perception. There's a saying, perception is reality. Mm. And I have one example where I think I've actually have drawn something into my life and maybe blocked something out, and something that I found. So drawing in about, it would have been about 20 years ago. At work, we did a personality test. Mm. And it was really interesting that, everybody who was just a normal team member, we had very similar profiles, and it was about influence and risk aversion were some of the dimensions. And all the people around us in leadership, they had the total opposite score. And so we had this conversation at our level, and how we are all really risk averse. And then I was thinking, no, actually, I packed my stuff and my canary and came to England. And then I just went to South Africa, just like that, over a weekend decision, like, actually, I stay here. So you can't really say that I'm risk averse, So what does me make risk averse or not? Is that actually the truth about me? And then I thought, if you start to behave like the people around you, and you believe that you are not risk averse, and remember that, then surely you can also become a leader. And the last 7 years I worked as a director at director level in charities, and that was really about just changing that belief and acting it, and then learning to believe what I found as a separate truth. But the opposite example is, so I have two German friends here, and we've been in the same town. We're about the same age. We're all three from Germany. We all live in Milton Keynes. Two of them have experienced a lot of, particularly since Brexit, a lot of negative behavior. And I can honestly say, in the 20 years, and I heard that from other Germans as well, that they felt ostracized, and that there's this anti-European thing going. And I came here because, I thought it's a multi-ethnic, colorful society, and that's what I see, and that's what I've experienced. I can honestly say, and maybe that's just luck, apart from one football game in 1994, Germany won, I have not experienced anything like that. And then finally, I became something that you would call, if you must label it, born-again Christian in 1997. And I was on this continuous journey, and then a few years ago, I thought, well, that there must be a bigger God. So I totally felt that there was a reality in spirituality, but I thought there is a bigger God than the God I find in church. And it's nearly like your soul goes out on a search and you find it, and I think I now found a deeper sense of spirituality that I cannot pin to any institutionalized religion, really. So, and I think there is something about, what we can draw into our reality.
Really rich again, the things you're saying. One of the many rich things that you were saying that jumped out to me was this first thing about perception, isn't it? Because then when on any level, I believe something about myself, oh, I'm not good at maths, or I believe that I'm this, or I believe that I'm the best thing since sliced bread. Let me not think about people on the world scene at that moment, but that might be my... But it's really interesting, isn't it? How then my world begins to shape around these things. And then, as you said, then I might turn another corner and then there's something that just invites me or nudges me to shift my perception, maybe events have. And then my whole world can kind of shift. So it's really interesting how belief is, on the one hand, can be the cornerstone of our world. And I wonder if belief sometimes can, if I'm not careful, because it can either illuminate me or it can make me blind, perhaps to somebody else or myself. It's really interesting, isn't it? All of these wonderful dimensions that we've talked about of belief. Anyone else want to come back in here? Perhaps you've been struck by anything that's been said already. Yeah, please.
I'd like to. I couldn't help. I started to do a Rob and started to make notes during the conversation. Someone's got to try and step in and try and replace him. Poor imitation. Anyway, but one of the things that really struck me about belief is other people's belief in you as an individual, because that can trigger. So the conversations that I'm engaging in at the moment came about because somebody contacted me and said, oh, you're really, really good at that. And I'm thinking, am I? You know? And it then started to make me think and put me on that journey.
I love that point. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I think this is a very, very powerful point. This point about the power of when somebody believes in you, it's something quite profound can happen. That what can happen, isn't it? Yeah, please, Iris, were you just about to add something?
Following on that, that's actually even scientifically evidenced in schools, where they had students where the teachers had a negative attitude and thought they're really thick and dense and hopeless, and they didn't do very well. Whereas where they had teachers who really would believe in the children's potential, the children perform completely different. So I think that's a very good point that Frank just did.
I think it's such an interesting point, and I think sometimes it's a belief in somebody beyond even what they currently believe about themselves is therefore really powerful, because then there's something around that power of that real connectivity, it's very difficult to put words around it here. This isn't it, the intentional thing, that thing that you just somehow know. And this is why I think it's interesting, these other words that you threw into the mix here, Leigh, these words around trust and faith, these words that from a scientist might not be quite sure about. But then again, it's really interesting. Another quick story, just before anyone, ages ago, for some reason, I became fascinated by having this compulsion. I needed to look up something about Einstein. This person who we know bits about his theories and so on, but I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where you just feel I need to look somebody up. I looked up online some documentaries, some old really old films about his work, and I watched one, and it was really interesting, and it just had very, very old footage. There's nothing of him talking, but there's just things of him, and about people talking about his work. And what was really most fascinating to me is that pretty much all of his theories started off as many people, when you talk about science, actually, when you unpeel it, were hypotheses, things that from very early on, most of his theories, including the most famous ones, from when he was some of them from like he was a teenager, and then over a period of time, that then the proof came along. So in other words, from this hunch, this instinct somewhere. And it's very interesting, if you look up lots of quotes about Einstein, here's somebody who you think is very much this very mathematical, solid, everything's proven, but there's something else that's going on there. There's something else that you quite put, which is, I find absolutely fascinating. I don't know if anyone wants to come in here on this thing that you can't, yeah, please, Danny, I can see that yeah, this chimes with you.
It's just, funny enough, this week it wasn't Einstein actually, I didn't look at it, I was just listening to a podcast and I forget who it was, but they were talking about the same thing. It was these amazing things in our world that haven't happened through loads of research, they happen from that hunch feeling or that idea that they have, and then later on they proved it or they've experienced it more and they've realized that is the way. And it's just amazing to hear those stories. I find it very interesting.
It is. It makes me think about when I think about I sometimes say, I've got this quote and it goes, sometimes all the tools, techniques and technology will fail you. Then at last you have to use your heart. I don't know if you've ever found that in so many things. You're trying to have a conversation, you're trying to work something out, and then it's not working for whatever reason. All of these things, all these concepts doesn't work. And then you just connect somebody heart to heart. And I can see Aleksandra, then the smile, anything you want to say about that. And magic happens. But you can't prove, you can't say why, you've just connected. Again, it's a bit like Leigh saying, below all of these layers or musts or this or that. Aleksandra, anything you want to say about that? Because I can just see the smile there.
I don't think I have anything to add, but I just really believe in that because there's so much diversity in our beliefs, in our backgrounds, in our past, in our ideas about future. But really what connects us is the present time when we just all breathe, diversity in our beliefs, to sleep. So this is like a basic human need, and beside that and behind that and above that we can discuss. But if you connect on that level, I mean, that is my belief, that we are all connected and we are all one.
Wonderful. Really, I love the thing you're saying about the diversity, this diversity in this and that and that and that, but yet we all sleep and we all breathe and so on. I'm trying to find a quote that I saw from earlier on today that I really so wanted to share. Anyone want to come in there whilst I'm looking for that? Or the two irises, I can let you both come in.
Yeah, you were just mentioning Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's interesting about Einstein, because he actually shifted the whole understanding of physics to the quantum level. He was one of the pioneers of quantum physics and energy. And I think a lot of quantum scientists have discovered a lot about different dimensions of our being and the universe, and vibration and energy. And I think that has a direct impact of your understanding of God, source, how you fit in and how we're all connected. So I think Einstein is a really interesting person. In a way, it is spiritual but also intellectual because of the science, and it is quite fascinating how a lot of quantum scientists are evolving into that direction. So whatever they find gives them a different understanding.
Very interesting. And I want to bring in the other areas there, but the word that jumped out to me when you mentioned that there's the word connection. Maybe what's interesting here is then that thing about connection. And again, it's come up a couple of times here, isn't it? That connection. So very often, if we're talking about belief in terms of faith, religions, and so on, there is something that therefore connects. And then here we've talked about through, I guess, individual lines of ideas, ideology, but then finding a place where we realize there is an interconnection. And maybe that's where it becomes magical, this thing that we are, however we look at it. You know, the thing that's always strikes me is that you can cut it anyway. You can look at it scientifically, you can look at it through religion and so on. It would seem we're interconnected, interrelated as one. And that's what's really fascinating. Iris G, anything you wanted to add there? I could see you were poised before.
It's something that Aleksandra said, and it was repeated. You repeated that, and I think that others did as well. Is this idea of interconnectivity, you know, among the different things. My mom is a fascinating person. Because she has this whole system of belief that she carries with her. And of course, like most Brazilians, we were brought up Catholics, and it's always fascinating to see her, how she talks about her Christian life. And she brings all this system of belief in nature that comes from her indigenous roots, which of course she doesn't know that comes from that, because my mom didn't study much and she doesn't look at things from an academic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But she has this whole idea, this whole belief that whatever she does, from the food that she eats to the way that she interacts with someone, nature will tell her if she's right or wrong. So, and she always tried to make us believe on that. And I think that we are 8 siblings, just of her family. And of course, we believe in some extent or other. We are not the same, of course. But, and I find fascinating, because actually if I am desperate, I go fully in her belief in life. If I'm desperate, be it for whatever reason, something goes wrong, I just go and I bring my mom into it. And then I try to connect with my space, the space around me, and one thing that she considers important. If you have problems, you do not go to what man created. You go to what is there, because nature will give you the solution. Sit on the grass, touch a tree, and stay there holding that tree until you get the answer. And she really believes in that. And I just recently interpreted for an indigenous person in Brazil. He's an activist. And straight away when he appeared on the screen, I said, oh my God, he looks like my uncle. And then of course I found out that he comes from the same tribe that my family came from. So yeah, that's why he looked like my uncle. But then he is someone that can put things in a way that is easier for me to understand. It's like, you know, in an academic way that makes sense for me more easily. And he explained exactly the same thing, you know, like, you know, you cannot just destroy, like he lives in one area of Brazil that I am from as well, where the river has been destroyed by a dam burst by a mining company. And then he was talking about how his family couldn't leave the place because they are guardians of the river, and they are there mourning the river. They are dying of hunger, but they cannot leave because the river is theirs. And the river didn't tell them to go. And that for me, it was very poignant, because it's exactly like my mom says, this thing about you connect. We are all connected. Doesn't matter where you are. And yeah, it was very interesting. Sorry about that.
No, it's very, very powerful, because I loved in that space about that connection above and beyond and before whatever my knowledge might happen to be. And I love that then, the thing about that, bringing that nature in it and that trust that this knowledge, wisdom, insight, it's just really, really extraordinary. And it makes me think of, yeah, I just posted the details of our retreat this Saturday, online retreat called Connect, because, and we called it that because, be it that I'm on a journey to reconnect to myself, my own sense of who I am, who am I, which some people are perhaps exploring, or wanting a deeper connection to others in some kind of way, or to a world around them. It's that invitation. But I'm really loving the dance of this conversation here. Me and Morris, I think we're due another one of your pearls of wisdom.
Oh, okay. Let me find you something. Let me open my diary, see. Oh, okay.
I like that. I just love the way that we were just like, it's like this wonderful box of tricks. But it's like, you know, those people who sometimes, isn't it? You know, like people have books and they'll just open a book certain times and they'll just open that book.
A quote here from George Eliot. All meanings we know depend on the key of interpretation.
So that again?
All meanings we know depend on the key of interpretation.
Oh, yes. That reminds me of a quote that once came to me. Language is our greatest contribution to understanding and misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think we've got to be very careful about language, concepts, ideas, and ideals that sometimes can be this overlay that stops us from this pure connecting. And often our knowledge is limited, isn't it? And yet there is something that connects us. There's that thing, you know, it's extraordinary. Anyone else want to come back in? Anything you're wanting to say Iris, you're going to say something. I'm going to invite Maya back in. Yes, Iris.
Yeah, sorry, this seems to be really my topic here. I'm just reading a book, started to read a book by somebody called Jean Houston, and she works with all sorts of like peace building, personal development. She's a really interesting character, and she's worked with all sorts of famous people as well. And she explores how different tribes problem solve and things like that. So this coming back to what Iris was just saying, how some indigenous tribes actually find solutions through singing and dancing. And so I think her theory just goes a little bit like the NLP thing, to actually say that we live in 4 different layers of different senses, and by just trying to use intellect, you don't quite get to the root of the problem. And she does courses and workshops with people as well, where people learn to connect more through storytelling and finding the mystical part in the group within themselves, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a fascinating thing that I found, but it really reminded me what Iris was just saying.
It's fascinating. And as you were speaking, and you were saying that thing about the different dimensions, and often intellect doesn't get to the root of the problem. One thing that jumped out for me is that often intellect is the thing that problematizes, isn't it? The intellect is the thing that this is a problem, that's a problem, that's a this, that's a that, that's a that. And then when we move beyond that, we realize that life is this dance. It is this beautiful dance, isn't it? You know, it's this beautiful dance. And Maya, anything you're wanting to add? I can see the smile again. You're really enjoying the conversation, I can tell.
Yeah, I think linking into what you said about going beyond the intellect and actually not letting the intellect impede us, I would say that hand in hand with belief is embracing our ignorance. And actually, by embracing it, we liberate ourselves to believe more freely and to embrace other people's beliefs and benefit from the interconnectedness of everyone's thoughts and views.
I love that. I love that. I think there'll be just so much more than that. Yeah, Aleksandra, please.
Yeah, this is so wonderful. I would just like to add Iris G and Iris K talked about, actually, like the river, you know, I'm going to cry again, poisoning of the rivers and the nature. And so today is Friday, sorry, but what I want to say is, like, in Buddhism we believe, and we try and do the science to find the fundamental nature of mind, because nature, when Iris G mentioned the nature, what her mom believes in, so I think, yeah, this science of discovering the nature of mind, like coming towards that in practicing meditation. But what my mom did, it was like nature of her good heart. So I think if we all connect that through belief, through good nature, and discovering the nature, you know, through being good environmentalists, sustainability, all of that, it's a core, it's a strength, it's a cornerstone. So it's the nature. I think the nature is such a good word for me, because everything, if we are natural, then we are good-hearted. I think if you're natural, we believe in ourselves and others. If you're natural, we will take care of our rivers. And
magical, really magical. Frank, I'm going to bring you in there. Oh, you just need to unmute yourself, my friend. So you are being like Rob now. Rob would often do that. He'd be saying some wisdom, and then he would have to unmute himself.
Yeah, yeah. See, it's gone. It's gone. No, I've actually found today's session, for me, probably the most enlightening about how it's made me, forced me to look at myself and some of the things that are really quite obvious but not so obvious before 12 o'clock today. I've been really gratified by some of the things that you guys have shared, particularly building on the, you know, the belief with trust and faith. The faith bit, I hadn't put much store on, but the minute it was put out on the radar, it all kind of fell together and made sense for me. I've taken a lot out of this. I've taken a lot out of this session. I suspect more than I've actually put in, but I'll try and balance the books.
Oh, you always break your heart into it, and that's the magic of this. And I think there's something. I'm glad you mentioned that word, faith, because it has an interesting vibration. It's beautifully elusive. It's beautifully thinking. It's almost like something that walks in front of us. I had that. And that's something that we've been gifted with. It makes me think about a word that once jumped out to me. It was really bizarre. I can't remember how many years ago. It may have been 10 years ago. And because it's not part of the usual language I would use, the word grace suddenly appeared in my beingness. I thought grace, and sometimes it's interesting, you know how sometimes, like Maya did before, Maya looked a word up. Sometimes I won't look a word up, and I would just sit with it and say, what does the word mean? And so I put that word to my beingness. And what emerged was that which life gifts us with in spite of oneself. Grace. That which we're gifted with in spite of how it is that I might show up in my ignorance or whatever. And I do think there is something about this, and I love that thing that you're saying, Aleksandra, about the nature of mind. If we're able to understand a little bit more about the nature of mind and how it moves, and become appreciative of all the different schools of belief, right? Schools of belief. One person goes to this school, another person goes to this school. You know, it's really interesting, isn't it, as human beings, because we get so caught up in the mind-made, the man-made, the mind-made, which is secondary to the intelligence which we're trying to discover, isn't it? The mind's knowledge is secondary, if you like, to that, you know, it's like the local, you know, it's like all the books in the local library it's like the cup pontificating to you about the clay, the water. Anyway, that's just, that just emerged. Anyone wanting to share anything before we begin to do our final wrap-ups? Because this has been a beautiful dance. Actually, Leigh, I wonder, can I turn to you for a moment? And I wonder if there's anything you might want to say about, and I want to invite you to perhaps say a word also about this Saturday's inner retreat about Connect. And it's a shame, Frank was also saying, I think it's dropped off the call, he can't come along on Saturday because Saturdays don't work for him. But I wonder if you might just say a word about that as you're here.
I think it's been such an interesting journey the last few months. I love observing people. I think since I'm an only child, so I've always been very observant of everything that's going on around me, and knowing some of the people from all over who felt very disconnected during this time, during the pandemic, and you know, all kinds of other crises that are happening in the world, and just people also needing to recheck and see, you know, with themselves who they are, where they are, what makes sense to them in the world, what is this all about. I think everybody's on some level, if they're contemplating going through some kind of semi-existential crisis about, you know, what is it that they're doing in this world. And I think it's really important. A friend of mine who was on the retreat last week, Jill, who's in her 80s now, and I've known her for a long time, and just the sadness of not feeling connected, even though she's a person who always connects with everybody, but feeling that you know, she's lost that sense of feeling connected. And I think taking it deeper with, you know, really reconnecting to oneself, really remembering who you are, you know, what this is all about, what your place is in the world, how we can do something really powerful in the world. I'm sorry, I've got a package that's just arriving.
No, I'll pick up on that. I'll pick up that.
You continue with that. You know what I'm talking about, Rasheed.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting, isn't it, that so many people might feel a sense of disconnection. I guess that's also one of the roles that I guess it's interesting that belief often plays, isn't it? That suddenly there is a connect, whether it is I find my self-belief, I connect to myself, or maybe somebody else has believed in me, then there's that kind of sense of connection. But the connect thing on Saturday is just an opportunity to connect on whatever level it means to you. For many people, it will be about that, reconnecting to my own heart. It's funny, isn't it? On this journey, we can lose heart, isn't it? We can kind of lose track of that. You know, when people say, oh, I kind of lost myself, or I was beside myself. But actually, it's also interesting, that thing, isn't it? That I'm almost going to digress into a song lyric of mine. But anyway, it's just that opportunity for us to really, really, really connect. So that's Saturday at noon. But I wonder if we, as we begin to wrap up, I'm going to turn to each person one by one and just invite them to share anything that they might want to share with us. Danny, I'm going to turn to you first, though you might be sending a text. I can come back to you if you want. Oh, what's that? Some gizmo? Oh, your book of wisdom. Danny's book of wisdoms, like Mia's book of wisdoms.
It's quite a modern gizmo, this one. It's I was just writing, I was wanting to sum up really from this call and what everybody has been saying. So it was it's a perfect opportunity, I guess, to talk about it. I was in the middle of trying to construct what I wanted to say, and I'll say it more from the heart now rather than what I was put on paper. But my sum up for today is a question to myself, I think, to take away with me this week. And that is the belief that I hold actually the belief of others that they've bestowed upon me, or is it actually really truly my belief? And to dig deeper into finding out from what you were saying, away from my mind and what my society and what everyone else has told me I should believe in, but actually try and find out more from the inner space of you know, my heart and my being and what that believes in. I think that's a really important.
It's really beautiful. You remind me of a quote. Reminds me of a quote. I'm so why I'm wearing this T-shirt. This quote came to me. This tag phrase, which some people know, it's a tag phrase on lots of my work, came from a saying by what's his name, Bishop Desmond Tutu. And his quote is, "You're a very special person, become what you are." And then from there, for some reason, this tagline, "Become who you are," emerged. And I have a quote which came to me, I can't remember how many years ago, must be about 14 odd years ago, early on in my coaching days. "Sooner or later, you'll hear what your heart's always been telling you. Stop trying to be who you think you should be. Become who you are." And of course, the paradox is that we already are who we are, isn't it? But yet there seems to be this constant thing of becoming or trying to find that who it is that we are. So I'm so glad that you said that. Iris G, can I turn to you for your closing statement? And I love when I see your office there, because I always feel it's like the Starship Enterprise, and there's you're in the captain's chair, and then there's the next chair for the second person in command. If you want to unmute yourself.
Second in command is my husband. I like to be the captain of my spacecraft here. For him, this is when I let him the second in command, because sometimes he doesn't have even the right to do that. Well, I think that today was really beautiful. I came thinking just in terms of belief, self-belief, and the confusion that, you know, sometimes self-belief can cause to others. But I definitely finished this session more wise as usual, wiser in my understanding of belief, and with a sad confirmation that I am becoming like my mother, you know. And but then it is good, because for me it's another pearl of belief that she had in the life. She put 8 children in the world, and she's patiently waiting for all of us to understand the sort of education that she wanted to give us. She embraced whatever, you know, the formal education could give us. And now when we meet, she say, yeah. And then we all keep asking her the little things that she kept telling us. That we asked her, where do you know that from? And said, oh, it's just my grandmother who told me. Because in her culture, it's just from the elders.
I love the thing that you're saying there, because I think it reminds me of why from when yesterday, this thing about the word belief, and I wrote the word belief, and I'm fascinated by the roots of words. And sometimes it's like coincidence. Is it coincidence or is it coincidence? You know, so sometimes I think words have far more wisdom when we sit with them in many dimensions. So belief, be life. Okay, it's just turning two of the letters around, but to be life. If I am life, You know, if I am life, and so but many people in Ginger, so I have to understand, I learn through life. Life will teach me. There's another saying which came to me once. It's my favorite saying. It's my favorite saying of them all. Listen, if you listen quietly enough to life, it will whisper its secrets to you. It's my favorite quote. It's my favorite quote of them all. If you listen quietly enough to life, it will whisper its secrets to you. And Maya, over to you, your closing words for today.
Yeah, so I think in a similar vein, in terms of listening to life, I would probably say I just want to embrace and invite in anything that is unproven and symbolizes a belief. So just through openness, through conversations with others, through just living day to day, and acknowledging that I have much ignorance.
That's wonderful. That's a magical thing to do, isn't it? Magical thing to say. Mia Morris, over to you. If we could have some closing words of wisdom.
Trying to find something. Have patience with all things, but first of all with yourself.
Yes, I think that's very, very wise advice.
When we talk about connecting and what have you, it's about where you are within yourself, really, where you are within your heart. And as you say, what's your famous quote about your heart?
There's probably so many about the heart. You know, the one that comes to my mind at the moment, which is my favorite, it's probably not the one you were thinking of, but it's everything boils down to love and compassion or its absence.
Oh, not the one I was thinking of.
Yeah? I'll have to remember that one. And meanwhile, Iris K, your closing words. Or do you want to just unmute? You just need to unmute.
Yeah, so yeah, I think for me it's a constant battle to be mindful of the mind and challenging that voice that makes you believe the right or wrong things or limiting things. And I just see what I can show you my little Zen master here, actually.
What's that? Oh,
wow, that's the dog.
This is the dog. Oh, yeah, the dog on the pillow because of the thing. Okay. Oh, yeah. Animals have
a lot to learn from him.
Absolutely. And Danny, your closing words before you open the shop.
I'm not sure if I've got anything else to add. I'm just taken. Thank you everybody for today, and hope you all have a really lovely week, and whatever you do ahead, just do it with compassion and follow the heart.
And Aleksandra, wonderful. And Aleksandra, last words to you.
Yes, so thank you everyone. It was very transformational. Sorry for all the time, but it was experiential. I really think this is important because I feel we don't come from the mind, we really talk from the heart. And that's where, when we connect, it's a real transformation. It's happening, and then it's like ripples effect. We can also create something better in this society, in this world. So that's why I really appreciate these sessions so much. Thank you, Rasheed, and everyone else.
Thank you all. And I think my closing words will be one of those heart quotes, which is, I think I said it before, sometimes all the tools, techniques, and technology will fail you. Then at last, you misuse your heart. So I just want to thank everyone for being here for this wonderful journey into belief. Any requests for next week? Next week, I was thinking maybe compassion. If we haven't done compassion, have we done compassion? We've not done compassion. That's a suggestion. Otherwise, any other suggestions? I mean, compassion check-in, maybe we should do compassion before compassion check-in finishes. But any other suggestions I'll take.
I had a suggestion actually that I would like to talk about, but I've totally gone blank actually. I haven't been thinking about it, but if it comes to me, I'll send it.
Yeah, message me. Message me. I'm open to those suggestions.
I'm not sure if we've covered it as well. Have we covered kindness?
Kindness. No, we haven't, but maybe we could put them together. Kindness and compassion. Maybe we could put them together. Kindness and compassion. Then it will be interesting to see if there's nuances between them. Kindness and compassion. Yeah, let's do that. And then I can see Danny's thinking about that topic.
Miracles could be a nice one as well.
Miracles. Interesting one. Very interesting one. That's a very interesting one. I'm just going to write these down. Compassion, check-in. Oh, that's really interesting. Miracles, kindness, compassion. That's very interesting because it's a word I don't often use, so I'm fascinated by it. I think that's a really interesting one. I'm going to sit with these. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I just want to wish you all the best. Have a wonderful week ahead. I'm going to stop recording now. And it's been a lovely